and play. All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome to New Patient School. Today, we're doing a training solely dedicated to front desk freedom. So the tactics and the routines to increase your show rate, conversions, and all of that good stuff. And if you've been here before, you probably are noticing, obviously, a lot of different creative things like, what's up with the bird? That's a dodo bird, by the way. What is New Patient School? So before we get started today, I want to kind of set a little bit of like backdrop of what we're doing, what New Patient School is, and we will go from there. So again, welcome to New Patient School. What is New Patient School? New Patient School are trainings and tactics that are built to help your practice grow with a steady stream, patient stream, right, of new patients. Okay, we have one goal. So patient stream, we have one goal. I mean, we get pulled and tugged in a lot of different directions as far as what capabilities and things that we can do, but patient stream has one goal, and that is to help our partners grow their practices with new patients. New patients are the lifeblood of a practice, and that is our goal. Okay, and so far, if you are a user to Patient Stream, we have automated Facebook ads. So that's one of our tools. One of the ways we help you get new patients, and one of the ways we achieve our goals is to make the barrier to entry, so running Facebook ads, a lot cheaper. So instead of paying $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, I know a guy that paid up to $8,000 a month for Facebook ads. I'm not going to say his name, but he knows who he is. But instead of paying those exorbitant amount of fees, you get it for way less money. Okay. Automated follow-up. If we can help you follow up with people, both with automation as well as the psychology and the mindset to do it right, customer service, we are working like a dog every single week. We meet together and say, how can we improve? How can we improve? How can we improve? And those of you who have been with us for a long time, you know that this is a big thing for us, and we take pride in our level of customer service. And then expert support. Expert support. I realize that while I have a lot of experience in the marketing realm, and even some of you may know I have some background in, when it comes to actually being in your practices and consulting, that's where I started this whole thing. While I have a lot of experience and things that I can share with you, I think we can do even more. And obviously training. So I want to introduce, and if you were on this training last week, then you know Dr. Andrew Wells. But if you were not on this training last week, then let me do a quick intro of Dr. Andrew Wells. So Andrew and I have been friends for about 1.5 years, 2 years, something like that. I don't know exactly the time frame, but we met at Dr. Woolner's MAP event. He came and he had just, I liked him from the get-go personally. And then when I kind of started learning more about him, when I heard his story, I said, oh, this is a good dude. This is a guy who knows his stuff. And this is a guy who's going places. So he and I have talked, and we've decided to really bring this integrated approach as far as training and in-clinic experience to you guys on behalf of Andrew Wells. So I'm going to turn the time over to you, Andrew, in just a second, but just understand that when it comes to some of the logistics as we move forward, what it looks like is we're going to do this training every Friday at 11:30 Central, unless an announcement says otherwise. Okay. If we need to change it last week, I had to change it to Thursday. But every Friday at 11:30 Central, it is focused 100% on new patients. Okay. So there's a lot of groups and people that do stuff. I want to just focus on this. I don't want to get good at all these other things. I want to focus just on new patients. It's open to your friends. What does that mean? That means if you're here, if I've invited you, you're on my list. Okay. And any friend of mine is welcome on this training. I want people to obviously know what we're doing here at Patient Stream. That's a big motivator behind that. But also, I think that what Andrew is going to share, and what we've got for you guys is, it's noteworthy, and I think you should share with your friends. And the link below is going to be the same for every meeting. So it's a whereby room on the future meetings. You don't have to copy and paste this or anything. I'll throw it in the chat later, but on the emails, that will be the link. So if you come to the next one, you can just, bookmark it or whatever. So I'm excited to get started. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And Andrew, I'm going to turn the time over to you. Just to kind of maybe, I did a little bit of intro, but I think before we get started, let's let the people who are coming to this training as well as future trainings a little bit about who you are and what to expect, and then we'll jump into today's training.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the introduction. I'm trying to turn my video on, Sam. I don't know if you want to see my my mug or not.
Well, I would love to see your mug.
All right. It says that you have stopped my ability to see my mug.
Let's see here. This is.
I see that. If you want to make me maybe the host, I think.
Yeah, let's do that.
That might work.
There you go.
All right. Now I got all the power.
Good.
There we are.
There you are. Hey, buddy.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, and for the docs who are attending. I'm really excited you're on here, and thanks for giving up part of your day to be with us and help improve your practice. And my goal, the first time I was on this training was last week, and my goal is just to give you some really valuable information that will absolutely move the needle in your practice, and things that you can measure, and so you can actually track results. And the one thing I would ask you in this training is that if what I'm saying and sharing with you sounds good and you're writing it down, let's actually take action on it. And I'll show you at the end of the training some really simple things you can do that doesn't take a lot of time, that will help you implement some of the things that we're talking about. And to give you a little bit of a background on where I've been in practice for about 10 years. My wife and I started a cash-based chiropractic office. It grew pretty quickly. We were working 6-7 days a week. And one of the biggest challenges we had as we grew and saw more patients is we started to add staff. And in chiropractic school and my former career, I had no experience on how to train and develop a team. And I think this is one of the biggest frustrations that docs have, especially in context of seeing new patients, is that we have to train patients on how to answer the phone, and we have to train our staff on how to answer the phone and how to greet patients and how to take patients through a day 1 or a day 2 process. And so we have to learn to delegate and train and coach our team in order to give a patient a good experience. And this is so relevant to attracting new patients and converting new patients. And that's really what we're going to focus on with New Patient School as a whole, but also in today's training. And I've been through I've killed a lot of staff members. I've not actually killed them, but I've destroyed a lot of really good employees and team members over the years because I didn't do a really good job of explaining what I wanted them to do or train them how to do what I wanted them to do. I just expected they would know how to answer the phone and convert a new patient. And I was really wrong in that. And so I've learned the hard way. And having, developed hundreds and hundreds of staff members through not only our offices, but our clinics offices, I've learned what works and I've learned what doesn't work. And so hopefully I can help you with this. And there was a really pivotal point in my career when, so 2 years into a cash-based office, we got really bored with it, as I do, and I decided that we were going to medically integrate. So we integrated our clinic and went through some ups and downs, but it was really successful eventually. And then we opened a second clinic, and that second clinic took off really quickly. So we had these 2 really high volume, big medically integrated practices, and we had all these employees, medical staff, front desk, and back office employees, and things were going okay. And then all of a sudden, actually, this is really good timing. It was 3 years ago, the day after Thanksgiving. It was Black Friday. We weren't working, and my family and I hopped in the minivan, and we were heading out to do to go see some gingerbread houses on display on Black Friday. And out of nowhere, someone ran a stop sign, hit us head on at about 40 miles an hour, and my life came to a complete halt. I broke my neck in 3 places. I had a broken sternum, a collapsed lung, broken shoulder. And I remember thinking, like, as weird as this is, that's like literally as the smoke's clearing from the accident, and I'm like hunched over the now deflated airbag. My first thought was, as like a husband and a clinic owner, was, oh my gosh, what the heck am I going to do for work? Like, we're done. Like, I can't. So just imagine for a minute, if you're thinking, like, what would happen, God forbid, if you couldn't show up to your practice on Monday? What would happen to it? It's a scary thought, right? And so laying in the hospital, recovering from a broken neck, and then, I was out of work for like 6 months in my bed at home. And I had to figure out how to keep these clinics alive. And it was a really tough situation. And so I had to figure out really quickly how to make them run. And thankfully, over the years, one of the things that I learned was how to really develop a team that can run a practice without you physically being there. And this is kind of like that thing I think a lot of docs strive for, is that, well, how do you help patients and how do you run a business without having to be chained to the office? So that if you want to go on a trip or a vacation, or like just take a day off, like, would your clinic run? And I've been on both sides of that fence, where I couldn't do that because I was the only person. I was a personality driven office, and I've been on the other side where, for 6 months our clinic ran without me having to be there. And I can't say that it was a smooth process, but we figured it out. And that's some of the things. These are some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you on training. And so fast forward, I have the really fortunate to be able to help doctors develop their practices as a coach in a practice management company. And so I'm able to share these tips with doctors, and I'm really happy to share these tips with you. And so a lot of the stuff I deal with our clients is like really high level stuff. And what I realized is that, man, a lot of doctors actually need some basic skills on how to answer the phone and how to get new patients in the office, how to make sure they're converting at a high level. And so if you don't have this part right, it's really tough to grow and scale a practice. It's tough to get away from your practice if your staff just doesn't, they're not doing the things that you want them to do. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I hope that gives you a little bit of context on where I've been over the years, and how you can, why this is relevant to you in your practice. So let's jump into it. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides for you here. Give me 1 second here. All right. And like last time, I don't know why this isn't letting me do it. You know what, Sam?
Yeah.
This is not letting me do it. Share my screen. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. Let me take a, what the heck?
So you're the host now,
I may
right?
just, yeah, but it's not.
Bear with us for 1 second. Let's see here.
You know what I'm going to do, Sam? I'm going to email you my slides.
Yeah.
And then if you can share those, because this happened last time, and it's doing the same thing here.
We will fix this. I didn't anticipate this, but hey, this is a live training. So yeah, go ahead and send that to me.
That's right. Cool. Sam, there you are.
And then maybe
right now.
Yeah, as it's coming over, I'll get it as soon as it gets here. Just kind of the training today is about, I call it, what do I call it? Front desk freedom or something. Give us a little backdrop. What is that? What is the premise?
Yeah, so and this is kind of a continuation of our training last week. So last week we talked about some philosophies and actual strategies on how to take a cold lead from Facebook and how to get them to show up in your office. And there are, there's sort of 2 ways of looking at it. You have the concrete actionable stuff, which are the scripts. So we always use scripts in our office, so our office staff knows what to say. But with that, the other side of that is also a lot of nuance. And the nuances are how you're saying what you're saying, and some of the the psychology strategies of what a patient's thinking, and they have certain wants and needs and desires and objections and fears, and we need to know how to handle those over the phone. And that's something that doesn't always show up on a script. And so this is one of the toughest things I've had with the staff is, and training over the years, is that we provide them with the script, and either they take it really literally and say, okay, I'm just going to say what's on this script, which is okay to some degree. But what happens when a patient asks a question? What happens if they have an objection? What if they say, well, you know what, I only want to come in if I know that this is covered by insurance? What do you say from there? So we would have like a list of like 20 some questions or objections that the patient might ask and how to handle those. But you know, so this is kind of a follow-up training on that first training we did last week on how to actually handle objections. And so some of it's a little bit practical information, but also how to really understand the mindset of how to handle objections, which is just as important. So, and Sam, if this is okay with you, what I'd like to do is go through some of these slides, and at the end, we can actually, so for everyone on the training today, we can actually post some questions, some common questions and objections that you guys have. And I'll kind of walk you through how we handle those common objections. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, cool. So if you want to skip to the next slide, and thanks for bringing those up. So this is, if I could teach you anything, this is the biggest thing, is you have to train on handling objections. And this is, so this is all in context of the first phone call. So in other words, Sam is running some ads for you. A patient sees some ads on Facebook. They email that they want some more information on an appointment, or maybe they call your office and say, hey, I have back pain, or I have neuropathy, or I have knee pain, I want some help. How do we handle that patient? Now, one of the things that we are really good at in our office is training. And what we did is we, 2 times a week, so every Tuesday and Thursday, we sat down with our staff and we dedicated time to training. And we had a schedule. So every, like at least every 2 weeks, we were training on how to answer the phone and how to handle new patient leads. And some days we just did, let's just role play the script. And on some days we would actually role play objections. But the point in this is that what I see a lot of doctors doing is they say, hey, front desk staff, here is our new patient script. Go ahead and read that script and memorize it. And that's what you want to say on the phone. And that's where training ends. And so if you're listening to this right now, if that's you, I've been there. But if that's you, you need to take it a little bit farther. You need to take it actually quite a bit farther if you want your staff to be good at handling leads. So don't just hand them a script and expect they're going to know it. So what I found is that if you don't train on something for 2 weeks, you start to get deviations of that thing. So and I've seen this happen. It's very true. And what happens is you have this script, but if you don't train on it, the script starts to change a little bit. And the farther you go without training and going back to the beginning, the more deviations you have. And so you have your staff starting to ad lib, they start to make things up, they start to change the script just based on whatever they feel is appropriate. And so all of a sudden, if you go months and years without training, you have this new patient phone script that is totally different from what you originally started out on. And Sam has this amazing script in his, what do you call it? The marketing.
Yeah, it's called the Daily Marketer.
The Daily Marketer, thank you. So in the Daily Marketer, Sam has an amazing script on handling new patients. You can use that one. If you have a script that's worked for you, use that script. But make sure that you're actually training on the script and doing role playing. And we make role playing really fun. You know, oftentimes like staff feels really nervous about in front of your team, like actually going through the script and handling objections, but make it fun. Throw out some crazy objections. So if you had, like, for example, if we ever had like a crazy patient call up with like crazy objections and they were really like tough to deal with, we were always like, okay, cool, let's write down that person and that scenario, and then we'll train on it. So we took like kind of a weird, like awkward situation and we made it a training opportunity. So have your front desk staff looking for those types of calls and those types of opportunities to train. And here's how I want you and your staff to look at handling new patient calls, is that we sort of look at it as a bullseye. And remember, the goal of handling a new patient call, the goal is to get that patient in your office for a new patient appointment. So that could be a consultation, that could be an exam, it could be your day one process. The goal is to get them into your office. The goal is not for your staff to do a mini consultation. It's not to provide free advice over the phone. It's not to be like, we had staff members, like they're almost like like mental health counselors when patients call up and they give you their life history and all the things that they've tried, and you're on the phone for 30 minutes, like, oh, it's so bad. And then they end the call with, well, I'll think about coming in, and you never make the appointment. So the goal is to make the appointment. Now, if you notice that your staff is having conversations that's not centered around the appointment, and it's centered around like describing therapies in detail or describing your day 1, day 2 process. So what I mean by that is, if the patient says, well, what happens when I come in? And your staff says, well, first thing we do is we have you fill out paperwork, and then we do a consultation. And after that, you'll meet with our chiropractor, and he's going to do an exam and take some x-rays. And then we're going to have you come back for day 2. And on day 2, we want your spouse to be there because we want to talk about finances and shit. Like, they go in depth about like the day 1, day 2 procedure. So if it's not about that first step, about setting up a new patient appointment or setting up a consultation, and you start getting outside of that bullseye, that's where calls start to go off track. And so I love this. I found this online today. Keep calm and follow the script. So let your script do the heavy lifting. And what I mean by that is just sometimes people feel robotic about scripting, but you really you want your staff to memorize the script and be able to recite it verbatim. With new staff members, we would laminate our script and we'd keep it right next to the phone. So if they forgot the script, or they felt nervous, or they were sort of distracted and the phone rang and they had to pick it up right away, they could always lean on that script, that printed templated script to literally just read off of. So you want to use your script. You don't want to deviate off your script. Use the script. That's what it's for. You don't, like, in training, oftentimes we had, like, for new employees, we would have staff kind of have the impression of, well, this script is good, but I'm gonna use my version of it or put my spin on it. You don't want that, because eventually what happens over time is they just start doing their own thing. We literally want our staff to say the script verbatim. Now, they can do it in their own personality. It can be themselves with that script, but we don't want them to deviate from it. So as we're starting to transition this conversation into, away from like the script, and what happens when someone asks a question, what happens if they have an objection. So understand that the person on the phone call asking the questions is the person that's controlling the conversation. And here's where we see things get really off, is that when your staff member, for example, is like, let's say someone asks you a question. They say, well, when is your clinic open? And your staff says, well, our clinic is open from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And they don't say anything else. It prompts that patient on the phone to ask a second question. So, okay, what's the name of your doctor? Or what kind of doctor do you have? Well, we have a chiropractor. Okay, well, do they do it? Like, it starts to get this, like, the patient feels like they have to keep asking questions. Whereas the alternative is you always want your staff to be asking the question. So, for example, if the patient says, well, when are your clinic hours? Well, our clinic is open from 9 to 5. So the first step for you would be to make an appointment in our office. Do mornings or afternoons work better for you? So you're now asking the patient a follow-up question. And that may not be the greatest example of when to use that line, but you always want to be asking questions like, how did you hear about us? Or let me ask you, I see that you called about back pain. How long have you been experiencing back pain? When did it first start? What types of doctors have you seen so far? What was it that prompted you to call? Like, what was the main reason for you calling? So you're always asking questions. And when you're doing that, you're controlling the conversation. And this is really what saves your staff from getting into 10, 15, 20-minute long phone calls, because you're asking questions and controlling the conversation. So how do you answer questions without giving away too much information, without having 20-minute long conversations, and here's the tricky part, is that without being vague and dismissive. So I had a client call me the other day. He was on last week's call, and he said, you know what, I used that one liner that you gave me, and it didn't answer the patient's question, so they just asked it again. They asked the same question again. And so you have to do this, but there's some skill to it. And that skill takes some time to develop. This is why we do training. So if you're expecting your staff to be able to answer questions and objections in a really smooth and confident way without having trained on it first, you're asking too much of your staff. This is why we train on objections. So we train on tough objections. Like whenever we get a tough objection from a patient, we implement that into our training. So on that last little point there, this is where I see a lot of staff members and front desk staff. They feel like, well, if the patient's asking questions and I need to answer those questions, they feel like they have to answer the question that was asked. And what I'm telling you is you don't have to do that. And let me give you an example. If the patient says, well, hey, I want to know, let's say you have a weight loss clinic and it's a completely cash-based weight loss clinic, and they say, well, does my insurance cover this? If you say, nope, your insurance is not going to cover it, guess who's not showing up for their first appointment? That patient, right? So you don't want your staff getting into being the gatekeeper or handling the sales process over the phone. You should have a sales process, and you should have a day 1 or day 2, day 3 process in your office that handles those objections and questions as the patient comes in. So you don't want your front desk staff getting into these types of conversations or directly answering a potential question or objection, because sometimes there's no framework for that. They don't have any context for it. So you want to answer their questions in a way that answers their questions without being too specific. So what happens oftentimes is patients or the front desk staff is like, okay, Dr. Wells said, I'm not going to answer this question. I'm not going to be specific. So Sam, if you skip to the next slide, this is what we're seeing, is that your staff will do one of two things. Either they become Karen and they're like, oh, the patient asked me if my insurance covers it. And I can't answer that question for him because Dr. Wells said it wasn't appropriate. So they get defensive, they put on their armor. And what happens is over the phone, they start to sound a little bit like the Karens of the world. I hope I'm using the Karen analogy properly.
You're nailing it, buddy.
Okay. It's like they feel like I really want to answer this question, but I can't answer the question. So it's like they become defensive, and patients can sense that over the phone. And so they start to get sometimes even a little bit aggressive, where I'll give you some examples of objections in just a minute. So the opposite of that is, so if you look at the thing I like about Matthew McConaughey, whether you like him or don't like him as an actor, is he could insult you, but you also feel good about yourself at the same time. Like he has something like this, like Southern smoothness and this, like, I don't know what the attitude or personality is, but he's very smooth, very suave, and he can answer a question without answering it and still make you feel good about yourself. And this is a skill that my wife was running the practice, she was really, really good at it. She would answer questions, but in a way that was somewhat vague and somewhat general, but the patient felt like they were still being heard. And that's the important thing. So we don't want to be dismissive. We don't want to be argumentative. We don't want to be antagonistic. We want your front desk staff to be more like Matthew McConaughey than the rigid, cold-hearted gatekeeper. So I hope that makes sense to you. And we're going to go over some objections in just a minute, but this is why we train. So if you think about Matthew McConaughey, he's probably a smooth, suave guy anyway. But the reason he can do that on screen is because he trains. He's an actor. Like he role plays. He's scripted, right? I'm sure that comes naturally to him, but it also really comes out on camera. And the reason he's an Oscar, I think he's an Oscar winner. Yeah, he is. He's trained on this kind of stuff. So you need to.
Can I throw a little bit of maybe a tactical, just from my own experience, a tactical example on that?
Yeah.
I think whenever somebody is asking asking for information, the askee, so the person getting asked, I don't know if that's an askee, but the person getting asked, almost you jump to a response. And instead of jumping to a response, I think if you were to do like a mental exercise and jump inside the person's body and just see through their eyes what maybe the motivation of it is, try and understand them, and then jump to your response, then you're going to be a lot better off. Let me give you an example. So if somebody asks, well, why don't you guys take insurance? That person, obviously, they need the help. However, at the same time, there's like finances are a problem for almost everybody, right? And so if you jump in and your immediate response is in the camp of, hey, I'm defensive, they're going to read that. And now you have two defensive people talking to each other. So on a psychological level, you're not going to win. I mean, Karen is just going to leave, right? And so if you were to say something that kind of allied you to her and then pivoted over to your position, so why don't you guys take insurance? I know it's really frustrating. There's a lot of conditions that, you know, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's political. You know, if you say stuff like, I don't know if it's political, I don't know if it's insurance play, they just make it really hard for even procedures like LASIK surgery to not be covered by insurance. I don't know, but as far as whether or not we take cash for this, some of the treatment is covered, you know, and then you kind of go into it without giving away too much. And I'll go to your next slide. But I think just the idea is try and see it through their eyes. Do not get defensive. The second you get defensive is the second you lose. That is, I mean, there's all sorts of psychological clues that just throw up the red flag. The Matthew McConaughey's of the world, they are authentic. They are calm. They are, you know, they are like, they're not fit. They're not, even though they have an opinion, they're not set in a way. At least they don't believe you, or they don't lead you to believe they're set in a way. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, and if you can back up a slide back to that Matthew McConaughey slide, that makes perfect sense, Sam. And so you also want to make sure that you have the right person in the right role. And let me give you an example. Our case manager for years, and is a good friend of mine, is totally a Karen type person. And we have her in the case manager position because it's the person who's signing up the patient for care. She's going over insurance options. She's going over money options, financial options, and she has to have some level of confrontation. And so it's the moment where the patient's sitting down in their report of findings, and it's like, well, do I sign up for care? Do I not sign up for care? And sometimes you want some of that Karen type attitude because you have to have some kind of confrontation to get the patient to take some action and say, look, this is a serious issue. You've tried all these different things. What the heck are you waiting for? Like, what do you have to lose? Let's do it. And she's in the right role for that. However, when I have her on the front desk answering phones, it's totally, she takes sometimes that same sort of aggressiveness and attitude, and it's like, it doesn't go well on day one. So she has, like I talked about last week, about having a backup person and a backup person for answering leads. And she's like our third backup person. She's awesome at case management, not so good on the phones. I love her to death, but she's not the right person for that role. So the person we have at the front desk role answering leads is like your nurturing person. It's your cheerleader type person. And we do that, you know, sometimes they have, you know, I'll show this in a few, you can skip to the next slide, but sometimes you want to act dumb on the first call. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Meaning that you want, even though the front desk staff may have the answer that the patient's asking, you sometimes don't want to give it out because it's gonna ruin your day one conversion stats. And so here's one really common example, or a question and an objection sometimes you hear. Do you accept insurance? So if you do accept insurance, this is a really easy one. Yes, we do. Just bring your insurance card with you on your first visit. What time works better for you? So we're ending that sentence with a question. Now, what would you suppose, Sam? And I'll ask this to you, Sam. What do you suppose what could be sort of the underlying question in this question?
How much is this going to cost me?
Bingo. So they just want to know, how much does it cost? That's why they're asking if their insurance covers it. So if you skip to the next slide. So let's say you're doing like a neuropathy program or regenerative medicine, or you have something that's just not covered by insurance. So they ask, do you accept insurance, or does my insurance cover this? So if you don't accept insurance, the way you want to answer that is, well, just bring your insurance card with you on your first visit so we can verify your benefits. What time works best for you? Now, here's where docs freak out, like, oh, wait a minute, we already know insurance doesn't cover it, so you're totally lying to the patient. And we're not lying, we're just being slightly evasive. And here's why you want to do this. If you tell that patient, you know what, nope, it's not covered by insurance, and it's going to be $4,000 out of pocket, the likelihood of that patient coming in is slim to none, because you haven't built value for the patient. So the reason we still want them to show up for day one is because your day one or day two process is because you have a built-in sales process in your office. So don't eliminate the patient just because they have a cost question. They may $4,000 may be totally affordable and worth it to them. On the flip side of that, they may come in and realize that it's not covered by insurance, and maybe they have to figure out the finances, or you have a financial plan for them that they can use. And so if they say, now the other end of that, if they say, listen, if this isn't covered by my insurance, don't waste my time. I don't want to come in. Be honest with the patient and say, you know what, from what it sounds like, this may not be covered by your insurance. So if that's really what you're after, if you just want to do what your insurance covers, this may not be a good fit for you. However, we may have other options that might help you. Or, you know what, I don't think this is a good fit for you to come in. If they're that type of patient. And that's pretty rare when that happens, but your staff will get the sense over the phone. They should get the sense that that's that type of person. And sometimes you don't want that person to come in your office, and that's okay. We don't want to help everybody, and we can't help everybody. But another way to handle that objection or question would be, so do you accept insurance? That's a great question. The first thing that we would need to do is have you meet with our doctor to evaluate you. And from there, we'll discuss insurance coverage and any out-of-pocket costs. What time would work best for you to come in, mornings or afternoons? So you were answering the question, but we're not directly answering the question. And here's why this is fair. Because number one, we haven't done an evaluation on the patient. We don't know what's wrong with them. You have to first establish that there's a problem. We have to establish that we can help the problem. And then we have to give some recommendations on how we help that issue. So oftentimes patients, and rightfully so, they sort of put the cart before the horse, and they're looking at it through insurance and finances and insurance and finances. And I totally understand that, especially in today's economy and crazy world we live in. That's okay. And we want to be respectful of that. But we also don't want to discount the fact that patients need help. They have an issue they're suffering with, and there's an option that you could potentially help them with. And when they discover who you are as an office, what therapies you offer, how you're different than other practitioners, it may make sense for them to pay out of pocket if you don't have an insurance coverage for what you do. So questions on that? Does that make sense? I think I saw in the chat box there are some questions that popped up.
Yeah,
wrong on that.
I saw those, but I'm thinking maybe we just kind of wait until the end and kind of get through these,
Sure.
and then we'll do just a Q&A session at the end. That
Okay.
work? Cool.
Perfect. Okay, so this is one that a stat killer, a day one stat killer, is the patient says, hey, I would love to come in, but I really can't come in until next week or 2 weeks out. So what we talked about this on the last training is that if you're not getting a new patient in within the first 2 to 3 days, the likelihood of them showing up is slim to none. So we had a policy in our office that we would never schedule a new patient more than 3 days out. So the way we handle that objection is, the patient says, hey, I can't come in until the end of next week. What we would say is, well, unfortunately, we're all booked up through the next month, but we did have a couple of cancellations in the next couple of days, and I'd be happy to get you in as soon as possible. Do mornings or afternoons work better for you? So if they want 3 weeks out or 2 weeks out, it's not an option, even though it may be free on your schedule. We never did it. Unless they said, you know what, I can't do next week because I'm actually going on vacation. I'll be out of town, or I'm going on a work trip. I won't be back until this specific date, but I would love to come in then. The way we would handle that is, we don't have that date available because we're booked up through the end of the month. But what I can do is when you get back on that specific date, we'll give you a call and we'll set up an appointment then. Does that work for you? Yeah, that's perfect. So what I can tell you from just, having our office schedule thousands and thousands of leads and patients is that if you start to schedule too far out, those people aren't going to show up, and you're going to reserve those spots or take those spots away from people who really wanted to come in, because you're going to have leads coming in on a regular basis, especially if you're using patient stream. So you don't want to clog up those appointment times for people who are really like, they really want to come in and they have an urgent need and you want to see them as soon as possible. So the way we handle that is like, look, we're booked up through the rest of the month, but we did have a couple cancellations. We can get you in tomorrow afternoon, or would Tuesday morning work better for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. All right. And then here are, so those are like the two really common questions we get. And then there are a whole bunch of other questions that pop up because we're dealing with people. So for all, like 80% of all the other questions, and I'll let you guys ask some objections or questions, but here's like this kind of the standard line that we would use is, well, you know what, Sam, that's a great question. The first step would be to set up a time to come in for a consultation with one of our providers. The consultation is free. We can figure out the best way to help you with your issue, blank issue, whatever it is. What time works best for you, mornings or afternoons? So you see how the pattern of the end of the sentence, I'm always going back to what time works best for you. That's that bullseye that I showed you in a few slides ago. So we're always asking for the appointment. Now, don't read into this too much and saying, well, are you not asking any other questions? No, we're going through the normal script. So we're asking them about their problem and their history. We're building rapport. This is at the end of that conversation. If they're asking questions and concerns, this is how we handle it. So this would be like this would be a great way to answer a question that's like a specific question, like, hey, I have osteoarthritic knee pain. I've had 4 Supart shots and 10 steroid shots. Can you guys help me with my knee? You don't want your front desk staff saying yes or no because you haven't done an exam and they're not qualified to answer that question. So you're always answering with, hey, that's a really good question. The first step would be to set up a time to meet with our providers so we can answer that specific question that you have. So we will get patients who will ask the same question, like if they're not satisfied with that answer and they keep asking the same question over and over again. Well, I don't know if you heard me, dummy, but I said I've had 10 cortisone injections already. Can you, like, what type of therapy can help? And the staff, your staff, you don't want, this is where sometimes your staff member will crack a little bit. And if, someone asks the same question 3 times, you're like, all right, you know what? Here's how we do it. We do regenerative medicine. It's $5,000. Do you want it or not? Like, you don't want your staff to cave in. So we would literally answer this question the exact same way multiple times. And if you've answered the same question 3 times the same way, and they keep asking the same question, then here's the great approach that works is our staff will say, you know what? All I do is I answer the phones. I just do the scheduling, but I'm sure our providers can help you. Let's set up a time so you can meet with them. So just play dumb. And so you don't want your staff giving away too much information, even if they know the protocol, even if they know what's going to be recommended, based on the conversation. Your staff needs to play dumb, and not because they are dumb, but because we want to make sure that we're getting the patient in and in to see your providers and through the consultation process to make sure that we're taking care of that patient's needs appropriately.
It's interesting because there's a lot of, not to get religious or anything, but there's a lot of biblical even phrases about like, don't cast your pearls before the swine and things like that. And, these are metaphors and things along those lines. They're meant to carry, they're meant to carry some type of underlying teaching, something. And I think too many times the solutions that you guys are all, and we're offering to people out there are so awesome. And we think they're so awesome. And we just think, man, if people just knew how amazing my blank was, we've got a lot of Blueprint folks, and Blueprint has some amazing stuff for neuropathy and knee. They have these amazing protocols. But if you're unwilling to learn and to implement the stuff that you're talking about, which by the way is awesome, then you're really not going to get the chance to show them how awesome these things are. You're casting the pearls or your amazing thing before a premature swine, and it's like, they're not permanently a swine. Like, this is not hey, these are not all terrible people, but they don't become a swan. Ooh, I just came up with that on the spot. They don't become a swan until they have a chance. It's kind of like me and my wife, right? Like I knew at the very first moment, like, whoa, I like her. I'm guessing it took her a little longer to realize that, hey, I might be, I might be in the ballpark, but had she never given me the time, had I not, taken the time to nurture that relationship in the right way, then I may never have gotten the chance to, to make her, or not make her, ask her to be my wife. So that is awesome. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to, okay. Yes. Okay. So yeah, the video will be hosted. So let's go ahead and open it up to Q&A. Anything that you guys have, use the chat, by the way. There's no Q&A on this. If you don't know where that is, if you go to the very bottom, there's a bubble thing that says chat. Any questions that you have, go ahead and throw them in there. I think you brought up some of the primary culprits as far as objections that, I mean, even when I was consulting, these were the ones that kind of trip people up. And the reality is, I think if I love the end with a question, because there is so many times when a person comes in with a fixed idea about what you are, and that fixed idea about what you are is your enemy. And by the way, how do people arrive at these fixed ideas? Well, guess what? There's a lot of people who don't like you. Okay. Meaning, like, there's pharmaceutical companies who don't like you. There's, you will call it, the established medical community. So MDs, family practitioners, they don't like you. They take every chance to poke and call everybody else a quack, So these are ideals that are already there. And so it's not that you did anything wrong. It's not that your content isn't good enough. It's not that your marketing isn't good enough. It's that people are coming in with fixed ideas. And if you don't, give yourself the tools the tools and things that, like what we talked about today, you're not going to get a chance to show them your true colors and to show them what you really have to offer. So any questions? Let's see here. I've got 11 folks. Let's see here. And I know some of these folks here. So let's see here.
Yeah, and I hope, and not to beat a dead horse, and just to follow with what you said, Sam, is that give the patient an opportunity to come in and see your office with objections and with concerns and with biases and with prejudice. Let them come in. Like, right. we love difficult patients. We love easy patients, but we love difficult patients because it provides us an opportunity to say, hey, look, here's where you are today with your health issue. Here's what you've tried. Here's how we're different. You pick. Like, do you want to keep doing what you're doing? Do you want to try a different route? Do you want to go somewhere else? Like, you have choices. We are a choice, but we don't want that, that all important first phone call to be the thing that, that turns them away without really giving them an opportunity to see what we actually do. So we always knew if we got patients into our office, we would be able to win them over because we were skilled at what we did and we were compassionate and we love our patients truly. And we just didn't want to. So that's why we had to get really skillful in how we handled these phone calls, because could be, and potentially for a lot of offices is the big hurdle, the big gatekeeper. And so we didn't want that to be the number one hurdle.
So I wonder if like staff training, if you might be able to answer this question. Staff buy-in. So you have training, which training is the tactical approach, right? That's the reps and doing the thing. And then I know in the last one you talked about your incentives that you put on. But what about buy-in? What about, like, and this kind of goes to culture, I guess. I don't want to be, up in the clouds. I want to be down in the dirt, like tactically. But how important is buy-in into your solution, right? You've got staff that in one way or another, they are the face of your business. How important is them being hook, line, and sinker into what it is that you do?
Oh, it's so important. It's not the end all and critical, but it's really important. And there are some subtleties, like for example, I mentioned our case manager, and I sort of aligned her with the Karens of the world, and she's amazing. She's like super sweet, but she's also tenacious. And the reason for that is because she was a patient first, had been to like every chiropractor in town. Nobody could help her, and we really, we were able to help her in a lot of different ways and help her family, and we helped a lot of her friends. Like once we helped her, she brought in a ton of people who were also able to help. So she was like Dr. Wells, and I'm always nervous about this, but like Dr. Wells is fantastic. He's best chiropractor. He really helps people. So when patients are coming in, they're like, I don't know if I really want to do this. It's so expensive. She's like, he's awesome. You're going to get help. Like he can help you. I'm certain of it. And so just based on her enthusiasm for it and her her passion for the office, she would win people over. If your staff if they don't have buy-in, they're like, well, I don't know, I'm not so sure about this this chiropractic thing or chiropractics, or not really sure about this stem cell, whatever it is. Like it's going to come out, like it's going to negatively affect your patient. So even if they didn't come through your office as a patient first, like you need to spend some time with them to explain the science behind what you do and the philosophy behind what you do, and compare that to other sort of allopathic therapies or other, traditional type therapies in healthcare, and how we're different and where we fit in that spectrum and where the patients are coming in. So just because you've never been adjusted doesn't mean that you can't be a chiropractic advocate. And I think most rational people will know and will appreciate the fact that we have this, this specific area that we fit into in healthcare that's extremely valuable and extremely different from a lot of approaches. And so being able to if they have the ability to put themselves in the patient's shoes, that's a pretty powerful thing. Yeah. But you do need to train and develop that. They're not going to get that, they haven't read the green books, and they haven't been through chiropractic school, and they haven't had debates with other chiropractors and medical doctors. So you need to sort of indoctrinate them and have them go through I'm a huge advocate of having them go through the process. So when we would hire somebody on brand new, the first thing was they went through the day one process, and then they went through an exam.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
They did, we took x-rays, and we gave them like a report of findings as a real patient, so they could experience it, and they know what it felt like, and they knew like they would give real objections and real questions. So that's one of the first things that we do.
I think in that vein, certainty can be bred with culture. And so you do that by celebrating your wins. When people are like going through care and they go from whatever extreme to the opposite one, that should be acknowledged and celebrated, not just with you and the patient, but with you and your staff, because these are everyday stories. Like we are at some level, human beings we all think with the croc brain, with the brain that remembers stories. Okay. And the more stories that stack in your favor, the better off you will be in every sense of your business. So if you have somebody that's having a positive experience, share that experience, because here's what's going to happen. That will go down into a subconscious level and manifest an outward certainty. And that certainty is, if it's false certainty, like if they're scripted, it's you can sense that. But if it's authentic, it will pay exponential dividends. So Sibia says, we take payments to hold appointments. Would you have any recommendations as to how to handle that part of the conversation? I have some thoughts on this, but I like yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sibia, great question. We tried this. We were at a point in our office once that we had so many new patient appointments. We were like, how do we handle it? And we had some people that weren't showing up. So like, all right, the solution would be, let's have people pay up front for their initial visit. And what we found, Sibia, is that our day one appointment stats actually dropped. And so we compared this to actually just saying that there's we're not charging for consultations versus charging up front. And we found that we had more patients show up if we weren't charging anything. And I understand the rationale behind it, because I tried it as well. but our stats were worse. And I'm not saying that you should not do that. If it's working for you, by all means do it. Don't change it if it's working. But I think it's an added barrier for the patient. You're adding an extra step, and it's a pretty big step, even if it's a nominal amount, like $20 or $30 or $50 to square away their appointment. They don't know who you are yet. You haven't established any rapport or any trust. You're just like you're no different than any other office from their point of view. So why make it more difficult for them to come in? And I hope that makes sense. And there are ways that you can certainly rationalize that to a patient and say, hey, the reason we do this is because we're a really busy office, and we want to make sure that we're just setting aside appointments for patients who are serious about coming in. I totally get that. And so if you're going to do that, I would explain it just like that. So Mrs. Jones, in order to secure your appointment today, or your appointment for Wednesday next week, we ask for a $50 down payment, which reserves or holds your spot in our office. We're a very busy office. We just want to make sure that you're serious about coming in, and you're not taking away a space from somebody who really wants to. It's tough. I'll just be honest, that's a really tough thing for a new patient who doesn't know you to understand, because most offices don't do that. So if it's a dental office or primary care or chiropractic office, it's going to seem a little bit like a foreign concept.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, we tried to see a functional medicine doc a few months ago for some health issues that my son was having, and she lives, her practice is not on the other side of the country from where we are, and she had like a 2-month wait period. 2-month wait period. I'm like, dang. And I know why, because she's amazing. She's an awesome practitioner. But 2 months, I'm like, man, we really need to get help with this now. And I don't know if we can wait that long. And so we ended up not going to see her just because of the wait. And that was the barrier. And the scarcity thing for her, the reason this doctor doesn't charge anything up front is because, hey, if you want to see me, the barrier is you're going to wait 2 months to see me.
Yeah.
So that's, and it was just out of necessity for her, because she's just so busy. So I hope that answers that question. That's just my look on it. And then the other question you have is,
hold on. Let me give my two. Yeah. So I think there's actually some demographic things that you can take a look at, right? I have noticed across all of the country, the clinics that have older populations, older demographics, you can get away with this more, right? And I say get away with, I honestly think it's, like you said, in most cases, it's going to hurt your overall new patient numbers. At the end of the day, default to not doing it. But we have a couple of people that do it. And one is because of just how busy their office is to begin with. That's one reason. But another one, they just have very, the average population is 50 years plus, they're just older. And that age group is used to, paying their fair share. The younger age group, they kind of, they understand that, this is capitalism and people are, trying to earn their business. And so their expectation is not that way. So I would say, as a general rule of thumb, you do not want to add more friction to that process. You want to engage and commit. So engage them. So that's relating to them, doing the scripting and talking with them the same way Dr. Wells has been talking about today, as well as commit them. Say, hey, because we take helping people with neuropathy so seriously, we want to make sure that you show up for your appointment. So are Mondays or afternoons better? They say Monday, they say whatever. Okay, great. Then if I give you a time at 10 o'clock, is that going to work well enough for your schedule so we won't need to reschedule? Something along those lines where, and again, you end it with a question, but you're committing them instead of, because that's a level of friction that is it's agreeable. There's an exchange there. Okay, you will pay when you get in, but right now the level of exchange that we've established is you've committed to me after we've related, after we've engaged, that you're going to come. And so now we have a social agreement. and then you advance it from there into a paid agreement, and so on and so forth. Everything kind of, comes through an organic process. So I do think too many people, you need to not think so much like a doctor or like a business owner and think, well, we're going to use this one black and white thing, which is the number or pay in advance, to filter out the wrong people. That is not the way to do it. And that's also not the right mindset. That's a poor mindset to getting new patients. You need to get them in, educate, and convert. And so I'll let you do the next one. And then once we're done with that, we're about over an hour, so we'll conclude then. And maybe you could kind of give us your ideas as far as moving forward, what the future's trainings look like.
Yeah, great. And Sylvia, to answer your second question, do you require a spouse at both the consultation and the ROF? Any input on that? Yeah, I would not have the spouse come for the consultation just because you haven't established a need for them to be there yet. I'm a big advocate of having the spouse there for the report of findings, but that only works because you need to establish that there's some reason for the spouse to be there. And the reason would be, well, you have a serious health issue, then we want your spouse to be aware of that. But we all know, as the practitioner, as the clinic directors and runners of the clinic, is that we want them there because the patient needs to make a financial decision. That's the reason. So in order to tell a patient, you can't just say, hey, we need your spouse to be here for the ROF because you can't make a financial decision on your own, or it's going to be really expensive, so we need your spouse to be there. You need to have some sort of reason. So the reason we would give is like, hey, you've had this issue for 5 years, nothing's helped so far. Based on the initial findings that I'm looking at here on day one, I think we can help you, but we want your spouse to be there on the next visit to go over recommendations so that you know what's wrong and how we can help, and so your spouse is also aware of the problem and how we help. We're also going to talk about insurance and finances, and spouses usually like to make that decision together. So you need some kind of reason to do that. I think it's really tough and awkward if you're to do that on day one and say, you know what, I see that you have knee pain. We really want your spouse to be here to look at your knee. You're going to be like, well, why the heck does my spouse need to be there? It can make the patient feel like they're a child and they need to have their parent there with them. And so there's really, I found no reason to have a spouse there on day one. If they show up, great. And I think I understand why you may have the spouse there, and it makes the process a whole lot easier if the spouse is there on day one, because they get to be a part of the process and they get to understand, learn more about your office. But if they're not there, it's just the same. So if the patient comes back, if the patient's spouse comes back on day two, we have a process for our clients on how to bring their spouse up to speed before we do the ROF and during the ROF process. So that's another barrier, I think, just like the sort of money to secure the appointment, that's not really necessary. I understand, I think, why you may want to do that, but yeah, I would skip that.
Cool. So you actually did a little bit of a transition into, there's these different rungs of the ladder, and you don't want to skip them. You want to do them in the right order. So, you talked about how to, bring the spouse up to speed before you jump into, a closing protocol. So maybe over the next couple of weeks, maybe take 2 minutes and let us know kind of your thoughts on future trainings. We don't have a set framework yet, but maybe just the next one or two, and just kind of your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think the next logical transition would be how to talk about what happens on day one. So remember, in the beginning of this call, and sort of the big theme of this training today was just getting a patient through the front door. That's the first step. And the reason we want to do that is because we have a built-in sales process for day one and day two. When I say day one and day two, you may have a 3-day or a 4-day process, and that's okay. But I want to talk to you, and I would love to train on what happens on day one. So how to build rapport, build connection with a patient when they walk through the front door, and even before they walk through the front door, some things that you can do to increase your day one show rate, to increase your day two show rate, and to talk about sort of the sales process that's built around seeing the patient in your office for the first time. And I'll say that it's more than just greeting them, having them fill out paperwork, doing an exam, and sending them on their way. There are some really key things that you can do to help build value for those patients and make them feel welcome and a part of your office from, especially if they're coming from like a Facebook ad or from cold traffic versus a referral. So yeah, I would love Sam to talk about the day one process, some strategies on day two, and then maybe some over the next few weeks, some retention, like new patient retention programs.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Dr. Wells, thank you so much for doing this. This has been awesome. Everybody that came, thank you for coming. Again, you'll get future invites and they'll have a new link. That link will be static, so we'll be in a whereby room instead of a Zoom call. They're very similar, but we'd invite you to invite your friends. If you have any questions, you can email me at sam@mypatientstream.com. Thank you, Dr. Wells, for coming. You've been awesome, buddy, and we'll see you guys later.